Question 33, solve each equation. Be sure to find all possible solutions and check your solutions. Okay, so I like what they talked about in this section today. They talked about using this method called looking inside and just asking yourself, well, what does that thing, what could that thing be that I would produce values of 7? So if I look at A and I'm considering this value x, right? The absolute value of x is 7. There are two things that could be, right? That x could be either negative 7 or that x could be positive 7. And I usually just write it exactly like that. Either one of those results, if I was to take the absolute value of either one of those, I would get 7. So there are two solutions, and that's what they are. Either x is negative 7 or x is positive 7. So I'm going to take the same exact tact with this. I'm going to look inside. And again, what I'm saying is that this thing inside could either be positive 32 or it could be negative 32, right? And I'll just write both down. Either 2x is negative 32, right? Or it's the case that 2x is positive 32. In the case that 2x is negative 32, that means that x is negative 16. And in the case that x is positive, or if 2x is positive 32, then x would equal positive 16. And this right here kind of leads to one of the common misconceptions students have, and I will start to see this error from this point forward, is when you see this, a lot of you are just going to say, oh, I only have to do the problem once. One will be positive, one's negative. Well, I'm just going to tell you right now, good luck with that. That is not always the case. So try and think through what's happening here. And in fact, I think the next problem kind of illustrates that. So let's think about C. So on C, again, looking inside this thing, the x plus 7, there are two things that can be. The x plus 7 could be the number negative 10. And think about it. It makes sense. If this thing was negative 10, then I would have the absolute value of negative 10, right? Which would give me positive 10. Or the other thing that it could be is the x plus 7 could be a positive 10. And again, if I was to plug a positive 10 into this inequality or absolute value expression, right, then the absolute value of that would be 10. Okay, so now let's solve each of these independently. I'm just going to use the subtraction property of equality. On this side, if I subtract 7 from both sides, I get negative 17. And over here on the other one, I say, or if I subtract 7 from both sides, I'm going to get x is the number 3. So there are two values of x that work, right? If I plug in negative 17 or if I plug in 3. In the case that I plug in negative 17 for x, then this becomes negative 10. Absolute value of it is 10. In the case that I plug in 3, this becomes positive 10. The absolute value of that is 10. So our two values that are solutions are negative 17 and 3. Last problem here. When I see these, I do not like to think about looking inside until I have the absolute value part alone. So I will typically isolate the absolute value expression, kind of like treat it as its own variable. Once I have that alone, then I can consider looking inside. So what I'm going to do to both sides of this is I'm just going to go ahead and divide both sides by 5. When I do that, this is going to become the number 7. Right, 7 times 5 is 35. So the absolute value of x is 7. So my two values are either x is negative 7 or x is positive 7. And that's a very straightforward problem, right? If I plug in negative 7 into here, it's 7. It's negative 7 in there, it becomes a positive 7. 5 times 7 is 35. Same thing if I plug in a positive 7. 5 times 7 is going to give me 35. So these are the two values that x can be. And you can see, on A, B, and D, it was positive and negative 7 for two of them, and positive and negative 16 for the other one. But please notice what's happening in C, because that's a kind of a more typical problem, is that when you break it up into two different things using looking inside, you get two different equations. And, it's not just that you've got a value and the opposite of that value. Here we've got negative 17 and positive 3.